Listen up. Average is not an option. Are you up to par? Get ready to tee off. Jim Paar is a badass with a bow tie when it comes to knowledge. Watch out because he is lethal when it comes to 10xing your business or building a new business. Welcome, Jim Paar.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm interviewing Jeremiah Knight today. And if you listen to the Up2Paar Podcast, you know that we interview a lot of entrepreneurs. We help you break that 9-to-5 cycle and take control of your own destiny. And so my guests and myself give you ideas, gold nuggets to help you create success. So Jeremiah Knight is such an inspiration to anyone that is around him, whether in person, on the internet. You don't have to know Jeremiah to be inspired by him. Jeremiah was born in California, then ended up in Minnesota like myself. And he was born in Santa Ana and ended up in Carlstad, Minnesota. So look that up on Google Maps right now, and you will see it way up in the top of Minnesota, in the middle of nowhere. And so, but I was raised in Minnesota too. In the middle of nowhere. So Jeremiah and myself, we have so many synergies in the movement of our lives because we also both ended up in Orange Beach, Alabama, where he lives now.
Of all places.
He has worked with, he works with the city of Orange Beach on many levels, started maintenance, I remember that, and worked for the police department where I met him. And then currently working as a corrections officer in Orange Beach, taking care of those big, high-risk, maximum security prisoners. So he recently released his second book, Diaries of the Holy Knight, which I have right here. And I'm just going to tell you the chapters, the titles are incredible. And this book is about Justin Smith, a 14-year-old from Gulf Shores, Alabama, who has been waking up from nightmares ever since he returned from the in-between. And we'll talk about the in-between, or I'll let Jeremiah explain that a little bit, and where his imagination comes from. But it's an incredible Christian book. And we're going to let Jeremiah share you pieces of the story, but not enough to give the story away. We want you to order it. Go to Amazon, check it out, get it right now. Kindle is less than $1. So if you can't afford 99 cents, give me a call right now. I'll give you the 99 cents so you can order the Kindle. But today, Jeremiah Knight's going to inspire you, give you the insight on how you can write a book, because he's going to tell you that it hasn't always been easy, but he's learned a lot. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Jeremiah Knight. Welcome, Jeremiah, to the show. And I am so honored to have you. And tell us a little bit how you ended up in Carlstad, Minnesota to Orange Beach. Let's start with that story first. Let's give some backstory to Mr. Jeremiah, because it's really interesting.
Hey, you guys are awesome. I believe in your dreams. My name's Jeremiah Knight. Jim Paar, I wish I looked like you. So how did I end up in Carlstad, Minnesota? Well, I was born in Santa Ana. We lived in Huntington Beach, which is just right next to Santa Ana. But and when I tried to get my birth certificate years later, we had to get it from Sacramento because that hospital is no longer in Santa Ana. We lived in Huntington Beach for about 2.5 years. And then we moved to Maryland, to West Virginia, back to Maryland, and then to Champaign, Illinois for my dad to go to college. And then from Champaign to Orville, California, so we could be closer to our grandparents who lived in Paradise, even though I think it's like an hour away. And then finally at 8 years old, we moved to Carlstad, Minnesota. My dad was just, my parents, they were just trying to find themselves. It was like a journey to better themselves, because both of them, my dad in particular, was raised in the prison system. He spent quite a bit of time in San Quentin, and, he did a lot of bad things, but he found Jesus inside. So he was trying to change. And he was just trying to find himself in a world without gangs. So where did he go? Northern Minnesota.
Wow, that's interesting. I never knew that story till just recently talking to you the other day. San Quentin is no walk in the park. It's definitely
Oh gosh.
tougher than Orange Beach jails for sure. So
Ah,
don't
ah.
spit up your drink there.
Went down the
I
wrong
lived
tube
in
and up my
California,
nose.
so San Quentin was like actually a lot of people from Alcatraz when Alcatraz was shut down were shifted over to San Quentin. That
San
is
Quentin.
a serious deal. So um, that is tell me a little bit about your family. What was your growing up, what was your life like? Was it the perfect life? Because many people feel that obviously not, because if your dad was in San Quentin,
Yeah.
a lot of people feel that to be successful you have to have the perfect life.
Oh, geez, look at Stephen King's life. Goodness gracious. His dad walked out on them when he was, very young, the mom had to raise them single, and they were just poor. He would sit there in the cold in whatever house they were staying in or whoever they were, borrowing a house from. And they had nothing. They had zero clothes, zero food, very little food. And he would just sit there eating through books because he wanted to put himself in a different place. And, I didn't have that. It wasn't that bad for me. At a point in time, we were very poor. But when we went to Minnesota, my dad had built up money because he found his hustle. His hustle was to buy paintings for cheap, paintings that, other people or, pottery or that were very expensive, but he found them for cheap in all these thrift stores. And he would sell them to collectors in California. He made quite a bit of money doing this, and legal money. So, and then when he moved to Minnesota, he did the same thing. But he wanted to, at first, he wanted to make a decent wage. So he started working for Polaris. But my parents always fought. And one of my first vivid memories, we're 4 years old. It's me and my sisters. We're in a trailer park in Illinois. My dad's getting arrested, and I still remember it. And actually, this is the same when I talk to my sisters. My dad's getting smacked and beaten by my mom because they would they'd rally each other up, but my mom would turn physical first, and my dad pushed her. And when he did this, she immediately called the police, and they arrested him because my dad's a big guy.
Right.
He
I can imagine seeing you,
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got pictures on my Facebook about like how physically big. I mean, he looked like a bodybuilder when he was in San Quentin. Zero legs though, because he's a prisoner, but huge upper body. And they arrested him. Of course, they looked at his extensive history and they just released him. But they would always they'd always argue, and so that continued from Illinois to California to Minnesota. Goodness gracious! We didn't have a perfect life. And then when my dad got crushed, he got crushed by a forklift working at Polaris. We had no money. There was no money coming in. We had to fight the what are those people called? The
IRS or
no, the ones that protect the company from lawsuits.
oh yeah,
the
like the union or whatever.
Yeah, we had to fight disability, because
right.
He'd gotten crushed, and actually, what was kind of cool is the union was staking up for him. So there are goods to unions.
So with that said, who impacted you the most when you were growing up? Was it
Jesus?
There you go.
Yeah, no, because I remember when I was very young, we were watching on TV, and we would go to church every once in a while. I just found it boring. But I saw this guy getting whipped, and oh gosh, I'm gonna start crying. And they're just beating him for no reason. And I said, why are they doing that to him? And they said, well, he's doing that for us. And I said, well, what did he do wrong? I said, nothing. He's the Son of God. And eventually they killed him and they put him on the cross. And I thought, he didn't do anything wrong, why did he have to die? You know, I didn't realize this until years later.
Right.
But and then I would start having these little, you know, Jesus was kind of my my imaginary friend growing up, and God would be his parent. I don't know. It's weird.
And a good one. With that said, you know, obviously he was your protector and was the one that really pushed you through and gave you strength and everything else. You know, for somebody facing those challenges or somebody facing challenges, what would you say the best way to push through those are? What is the best way to handle those?
The only way I got through a lot of this stuff was by praying. And God, you know, it was so interesting. I'd be so mad or sad, or, you know, because you don't know how to cope with your parents hating each other, you know. I also didn't want them to get divorced. You know, I was very selfish because I wanted this, you know, being in that situation and seeing people with what I think or thought had a perfect life. You know, their parents are together, they love each other, they show up to sporting events, you know, they're always there for each other, and they never talk bad about each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted. I didn't have that. And so I was selfish. I didn't want my parents to split apart, you know, and they're very physical with each other, you know. It was just, I totally went off track. What was I talking about?
Yeah, you were about somebody that faces challenges.
Oh, just pray.
Yeah, just pray.
And
So
keep
with
moving.
that said, you know, you went through a lot of hurdles and you were able to overcome those, obviously with your spiritual backing, or like I say, you know, really God was that was your real father, you know.
Yes.
At the time.
Yes, absolutely.
He was in effect, he was the father that held you together and pushed you through and got you to where you're at now. And with that said, you know, how did you come up with the idea, the concept? I know you have more books than just Diaries of the Holy Night. You have another book prior to that, which was a great book. How did you come up with the idea, concept? You're laughing.
Yeah, because it's hilarious. It's just short stories that make no sense.
Of your book. How did you come up with Diaries of the Holy Night? Obviously, you, as a kid or something, there was like Stephen King, there was an imagination where, because I've read the book, I mean, the fantasy behind this and the story behind this is so good, because, and to me, it's like, you know, kids these days go through things in high school that a lot of parents don't know about.
That's
Even
true.
You know, they get home, they're not going to tell their parents about, you know, kids doing this or doing that. So what inspired you to write this book, and how were you inspired to get going on this?
Well, you know, growing up, our winters, as you know, you're from Minnesota, are long. You know, they start in September and they end in September. So we have all this time to read. You know, so I'd sit there and read fantasy books. I would play role-playing games, and I would weightlift because, you know, my dad, when I was 10 years old, we started weightlifting together, and he told me, and this is something that sticks to me even now to the day. Hold on, what? Oh, my son's just knocking on the door. You know, God gives you all the strength that you need, but in a second, if you abuse it, He could take it away. So, well, I keep looking over here because I know he's messing around. What do you want, son? That's what I thought. He's just messing around.
He wants to be on the podcast.
Well, I mean, he can come in anytime he wants to. But no, so J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, I love the maps. And I started drawing my own maps too.
That's so cool.
and I would base stories off these maps, and I, I had different creatures, and I loved how J.R. Tolkien had like elves and balrogs and ents and these huge gods that he made for Middle Earth. I was just like, well, I'm gonna have dog people, cat people, like normal thing, so, werewolves, ogres, maybe some dragons in there, but nothing is sinister or cool as a balrog. And then demons, because you have to have a bad guy. So, and, I read a lot of C.S. Lewis, and with C.S. Lewis, with his Narnia books, I realized why he was doing this. He didn't, he just kind of gave he gave Jesus, but in Aslan. He was trying to give the concept of Christianity to people, which I love. But I was like, why isn't it directly about Jesus? So when I wrote these books, I wanted a Narnia-style feel, but with Jesus as the focal point of the book.
Right. Yeah, and I understand that because you bring up Narnia, and even with your book, it's a message that kids can relate to. Like if they just pick up the Bible, some of them will understand it. But a fantasy with the way you describe it is a whole different thing that people get drawn into, because that's my nephew, my niece, they fought over your first book and that disappeared. They grabbed that from me and they loved the first book, which was like 5 times thicker than the second.
Oh, I've got it. Sorry about that. I've got a little bookcase off.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can see that. When I first got that, I was like, wow, unbelievable. But anyways, people are drawn into a story, kind of like watching a cartoon or watching a movie. They're drawn into it. So you bring a story of, overcoming defeat, overcoming demons. Tell us just a little bit about it. Don't give the story away, but tell us about Justin and tell us kind of why this book was written based on him.
Well, yeah, so it starts off because the first book has a lot of extra stuff in there that, didn't need to be in there, and a lot of grammatical mistakes, lots of them. So we got rid of all that, and, after being heavily edited by Patty Sadler at New Life Clarity Publishing, we have the second book. So Justin Smith, it starts off that, he's having these nightmares and he's seeing a therapist for these nightmares because it's a form of PTSD from the wars he's been in the other world. And the reason why he wants God to test him is because his sister just recently passed away from a texting and driving accident. And actually, as I'm going back through the second book, one of Justin Smith's goals in life is to start an organization that details makes aware the dangers of texting and driving, and which I thought was interesting because I type these things, I don't realize what I'm doing, and I go back and read them, and I was like, oh, that was smart.
Right.
But sorry.
If somebody wanted to start writing a book, tell our listeners, because there's a lot of people on here right now that I'm looking at on the feed right now that are going to be writing a book, that could be writing a book. What would you tell them? How do they get started? Because like you said, there was a lot of errors in the first book. And
oh gosh, yeah.
So what would you tell them to start writing?
Whatever's on their mind. I mean, just start writing. As you said, this isn't my first book. I've written many, many, many short stories leading to this. This is the only one I felt called to finish. And in 2017, I got it back from the editors. I was getting the cover back. I didn't reread it, which was my mistake. I should have reread it. But I also wouldn't have put it up if I had reread it. So I'm glad I did put it up. And then when I got done with it, because it took from 2011 to 2017 to get the first book out, and that was just me, gingerly typing away every once in a while. But if you can hyper focus, like Patty Sadler says, like 10 minutes a day on that book, after a year, you'll have that book. But if you can hyper focus, you could get a book in a couple of months. This second book only took a year to write. And the third book, I guarantee you it won't take me more than a couple of months to finish the third book, because I now know, after the foundation of this first book, where it's going.
Right.
I also know how it's going to end, but that's
yeah.
But then there's so much history I can make too. So
yeah, obviously it's going to be a series of books,
yes,
and it definitely has sequel potential. And I was going to mention there's some the maps that are behind Jeremiah there are actually the maps that are in the book. I was just going to open this up right here.
Oh,
but
nice.
Obviously they're in color, but if you go to his website, diariesoftheholyknight.com, there's some really impressive animation there. And it's just the power that the imagination that Jeremiah's got is just incredible. And there's so many people that want to write a book, and they always stop because they'll start writing a book and then they're like, they can't do it. They say in their own mind that they can't do it, but really they can do it. It's just their mindset that's telling them that they can't do it.
Yeah.
And one thing that you just said is, if you reread that book, I bet if you reread that book, the first one, you probably wouldn't have released it. And then you would have been dragging and dragging and dragging. Yep. And what I always say is perfection kills. Perfection creates procrastination.
It does, yeah.
Eventually will kill you. I mean, it'll kill your success. And so you really need to get out there and put things out there. I do it all the time, and somebody will say, oh, you got that title wrong, or you did this wrong. And I've done it with some of my clients. And you know what? That's just me, because I don't wait. People trying to get proposals out or whatever it is, they'll wait and wait and wait till it's perfect. But by that time, it's too late. Mm-hmm. So I'm really proud of you that you did that and really pushed that book out there. I just got to tell people, I met Jeremiah in Orange Beach, but where we really got to meet each other was we were both range officers. He was worked for the police department. I was a range officer and an instructor on the Orange Beach Police Range. And don't let him tell you that he's not a great shot, because he can take a whole magazine and put it onto a dime on the target. So, but I really connected with him at that time and really understood him. And I'll tell you, like, it doesn't matter if he knows you or not. He's going to tell you how incredible you are as a person. And if we had more people like Jeremiah Knight in this world would be a perfect world in essence, because there would be a lot more people believing in themselves and believing that they can do things. So, you've gone through a lot. You said it took you only a year to write this last book. So kind of, you've got a family with kids and your wife, Vera, what kind of sacrifices have you had to make to put this book together?
Well, like all your spare time, you have to divide it between your kids and the book. And, I was trying to remember what the guy's name, I think it's like Terry Jenkins, or he wrote the Left Behind series. And he has these not podcasts, I suppose it is a podcast, but it's about writing, and one of the first things he says is you have to sacrifice to create. You have to sacrifice time with your family, friends, on your spare activities, whatever, to make a book. And it's so true. You have to, like Stephen King wrote between midnight and 2 a.m. on a typewriter in a small back bedroom of his house, because that's the only time he could. I've worked, four different jobs just trying to stay here in Orange Beach, and I do landscape. I work corrections. But what's great about what's great about corrections is I actually there's a lot of downtime during the fall, so I'll sit there and type as I'm sitting back there. Because after 10 o'clock, usually, the inmates will go to sleep. I mean, really, they're just sitting around yelling at each other, talking about meth. But I sit there, I sit there and type. If you click, and it's so interesting because me and my partner, we laugh about this. If you click and just listen to them talk about meth, your brain cells will start dying. So
Yeah.
they're not geniuses, okay? So we just try to click off of that, because they have these sound things as you're looking at them, and you can click and listen, and then you're like, oh, click off that and just let it go.
Yeah.
But the reason why I tell people that I believe in their dreams is because when I was working dancing over here for the support services for the police department, I talked to some of the kids at school, and I would ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, one of the kids, I think it was 5 or 6, said, I want to be a welder. And I was like, that's very odd for a 5 or 6-year-old. I said, welding? Why welding? He's like, well, that's what my dad wants me to be. I said, your dad wants you to be a welder? I was like, well, what do you want to be? He said, I want to be a soccer player, like a professional soccer player. I was like, well, go for that.
That's right.
Go be a professional soccer player. Welding can be a backup like later, but go be a professional soccer player. I don't know what team, maybe Manchester or something like that. But that stuck to me because it hurt. As a dad, it hurt. Because I believe in my son's dreams. Even if he wants to be like a streamer or something for Fortnite, go for it.
Right.
My daughter's dreams changes all the time. I don't know what she wants. She wants to be a unicorn.
Yeah.
Cool. Go be a unicorn.
Yeah, I'm sure a princess, as any girl would want to be,
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's there was a comment my wife made that Jeremiah is like the Jeremiah in the Bible.
Oh.
And that is inspiring and impactful, and I can remember, I'm going to give you a story because I used to drive into my office, and he was a school crossing guard, or I wouldn't say it was that. He was part of the police department. So the police department would direct traffic, and Jeremiah would be out there and dancing in the street. I got a YouTube video of it I posted. So if you look for Dancing Jeremiah in Orange Beach, you might find it. But he would, even not connecting with people on a level of you and I speaking, he would connect with hundreds of moms and dads and kids in the morning because he was such an inspiration. He was dancing in the street, like dancing. And so it was, everybody talked about it in Orange Beach, and it was so inspiring. So if you weren't smiling that morning, you absolutely were if you went through that intersection there. And so, I mean, just everything you do, I can imagine even in your role that you temporarily have till your movie comes out and you become a New York bestseller, that you inspire those inmates in some way or another. Some will listen to you, some won't. And obviously, if they're intoxicated or something like that, they're not going to, maybe they'll hear you, but it's just amazing. And how do you feel? Because a lot of us are like, how do you go up to a stranger and say, I believe in your dreams?
Oh, when I first started, I knew there was a lot of risk involved, mostly just from being rejected or them thinking I'm crazy. But everybody thinks you're crazy anyway. They really do, because if everybody outside of themselves, thinks that the world's crazy. So I just go up to people and I want to show the world that there's some random person that believes in their dreams. I don't know, maybe trying to restore hope to humanity. Who knows?
Yeah.
I just, but after that, after that kid, I know there are people out there that need to know that there's somebody that believes in their dreams. And gosh, even now, I feel so bad for that kid.
Yeah, definitely.
Not
Yeah,
that
I hear that with adults that I coach, and I always leave in my signature line that I believe in them, or I believe in you, or always talk to them and say I believe in you. I don't have I definitely smile at people to try to, and if I speak to somebody, I try to leave an impact on them in one way or another. But I don't have the courage to walk up to somebody like you do. And that's what I feel, that's a real gift that you have. And you may not realize it, but the impact that you leave on people is incredible, because those people, they may not remember or know your name or anything like that, but they'll definitely remember you as a person.
Yeah.
And when you become the next Ron Howard of directors, or whatever, directing your own movie, or however you're going to do this, because I believe that Diaries of the Holy Night is going to be in motion picture, with the amount of Christian movies and that are been in the box office in 2018.
Yeah,
most of the number one movies that hit the box office that went number one were Christian movies. But how many Christian fantasy movies are really out there? There's not a lot that I can even think of. I think
I can't think of a single one.
Narnia is the only one that I can really think of, but it wasn't. It was a message that really didn't mention God or anything.
Yeah, and that was my problem with it growing up. I mean, I understand what C.S. Lewis was doing. He was trying to reach a broader base to bring them in to Christ. And that's great. But my book is all about Christ making kids into superheroes. And Christ does make us into superheroes. We are forgiven of all sin. All sin, it's gone. It's been paid for. And I think that's amazing, and I think that's kind of missing from Narnia. But I love C.S. Lewis. I love his books. I love his stories.
Yep, definitely.
So if you out there run a kind of production company, call me up. Let's get this movie made.
Yeah, I agree. You never know who's listening or who might know a producer to make this into a motion picture. But look at, the artwork is just incredible, and it's just the story's incredible. And I can tell you that the lead actor in this, because I just saw a pilot of it last week, would be Jeremiah Knight, because I saw a silent movie last week of Jeremiah.
Oh, jeez.
Scripting part of this, so he did an amazing job.
I'm pretty sure that had nothing to do with the book. This is the sword I use, by the way.
Yeah, there's the sword. Is that the same one that you open the box of books with?
No, that's the spider sword from upstairs. And just so that everybody that's seen it, this is the dog. He's okay.
Okay.
I've got him down here. I just figured he'd be down here. Not a single stain or scratch on him.
Yeah, that's good. So you didn't harm any pets in the process. That's good. So what, for those trying to build their social media out there, obviously you're big on social media, and don't say that you're not. Jeremiah's very humble here. What would you give our listeners? Because I always want to give them tips and some golden nuggets on how to build their business, build them as an entrepreneur. You're all over social media. What would you tell our listeners how to get your name out there on the internet?
So make silent videos. Chew on a tree and act like you don't know what's going on. Rip a couple tank tops off. win a
Yeah.
poker game against your daughter, and you're good. You're in.
That's right.
I just go around telling people that they're awesome. I believe in their dreams, and I do. I literally believe in your dreams. A lot of people are just like, oh, who's this guy? There's no way he could believe in my dreams. I do, and trust me, I'm just a guy with a cell phone, but I believe in your dreams. And sometimes it just takes that extra person.
It does, that little push.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad. Like when your wife said she's gonna get these books out, and like the next day she was done with them. I was like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? I've been working on mine for 7 years, and you're done with 3 books.
2 weeks.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But I always knew that you guys were going to be so huge. I knew Bling Life was going to be everywhere, and changing the world. And I don't know what it was, but God's like, don't leave these guys without an impression. Follow these people. These are your people. And I'm like, you got it, God. I'm going to keep going after these people. So every time like I reached out to you guys, I was always like, are they going to reach back? Are they going to, I don't know, you guys, because you're still so big to me. You guys are like superheroes to us. Even when you were just down on Canal right over there by the Dollar General in your office, you were just like such huge people,
Yeah. And I look at Jeremiah, I look at you as equal to me, and definitely, there's a lot of traits that you have that, I wish I had. And so it's not, I think as, being Christians, we're both very humble, and I know you're going to be big. And so one thing I always talk about, my wife talks about, you talk about, is manifestation and believing. Obviously, you say, I believe in your dreams, because you're basically professing something on that person, that if they have a dream that they want to pursue, you're helping them by saying those few little words. You're helping them to push that forward, and you're putting that into manifestation, putting it into life and giving it life. So, and that's why I always say when I talk to you that you will be a New York bestseller. I believe that truly. I believe that this is going to go to a movie. And let me ask you before we wrap up, and then I'll ask you a short question.
We're done already? Oh, that.
No, you can gather along as far as you want to go. But when you get
6
to heaven,
hours later,
when you get to heaven, what would you like to hear from God as you arrive at those pearly gates? What would be the message that you'd like to hear from him?
I guess I never really thought about that. I just take it for granted that I'm getting in there. I love you, I guess, instead of just, feeling his love. I'd like to hear him physically say it,
Yeah.
I don't know, because, you're going to be in spirit form. So
Definitely.
I guess, yeah, I love you.
That's awesome. So tell us how our listeners, we put a link, we're going to have a link in the podcast. How do our listeners find Jeremiah Knight? And I'm just going to tell you before we wrap this up, make sure you connect with him, because he will inspire you. He will promote you. He will do a lot for you, and he doesn't expect anything back. And that's what a true individual, a true Christian individual is all about. But how do our listeners find Jeremiah Knight?
You could go on Facebook. It's this. I don't even have a picture of my face. It's the picture of this book. I think I still have room for 300 other people. So send me a friend request. I have a slight way of checking to see if you're real. I just see if you have a bunch of cover photos that you've taken in the past 3 days or so. And if that's the thing, you're from Uganda and you're trying to get my money. So no.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm on Instagram as Diaries of a Holy Knight. I'm also on Instagram as Jeremiah Knight. You can follow my keto adventures, although I've been failing these past couple of days because a person that I call dad, even though he's not my real dad, he came down here from Thief River Falls, Minnesota to see us for a couple of days. So all I've been eating is pizza. So I'll be keto tomorrow. And, you know, I've got a webpage, diariesofaholyknight.com. It needs an overhaul, but it's there. And it's got like all the pictures that my friend Hoshino Sananaga has been doing for the book. I'm a huge anime fan, so a Japanese anime. So they're in the Japanese anime style, those pictures.
Very
And
cool.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. I appreciate you coming on, inspiring
This is an
everybody
honor for me. This is like my dreams coming true here.
And there's gonna be a lot more with Jeremiah Knight, and you're gonna see. I believe that we'll see him on the big screen very, very soon. So without further ado, I appreciate you, Jeremiah, and just thank you for sharing with us what you did today.
No, thank you, brother. This is amazing. And you're the best. I love, because, you know, great minds have to have the same kind of haircut. So yeah, mine's growing. I got to shave this a little bit, but I was in a rush for church today. And get yourself one of these. It's going to change you and your youth group. And yeah, thank you.